Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community. Luke Wientzen is a student and facilitator of many healing modalities, from yoga to the breath, energy, meditation, and martial arts. Luke has studied and practiced the work that inspires him. He believes in wellness and living a life of embodiment through integration, both practicing and teaching his craft. He is the co-founder of Our Breath Collective and the founder of Inner Echo. While sharing from experience, he continues to awaken to the benefits of healing and tap into the power of presence resonance. Hello, Luke.
Hey.
A pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Pleasure and an honor to be here. Really.
Yes.
Good to be here with you.
Yeah, I met Luke through Our Breath Collective and through just some incredible sessions that I was able to be lucky enough to be a part of. And I remember the first session that I was able to sit in with Luke, I was totally moved by his work and the presence that he really cultivated and captured in my own heart and my own spirit. And I reached out to him immediately after because I was so taken back by his ability to just lean into presence resonance. And here we are. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So what led you to all of this work? I know that that's probably a long story, but what captured you into this space of leaning into this healing work and these modalities?
Funny. A couple of main things did. The way I was raised Catholic. I grew up in a Catholic family. I'm the oldest of four, and I went to Catholic school. And I had a couple of experiences as a kid that really made me question what I was being kind of fed or conditioned by in that context, that kind of educational context. And I didn't really buy it. I didn't buy in because I couldn't find a direct experience that was kind of evidential to me of like what Catholicism was pointing at, particularly in the interest of like Christ and God and then all the complexities around like behavior and earning God's favor or eternally being condemned to hell and all that. I kind of always went like, really? I felt that there was a lot of kind of paradox. A couple of really specific things happened. One of them was when I was in third grade, we had a priest that was actually a really pretty cool dude, Father Kelly. And he came into our classroom. He wasn't my teacher, but he came into this small class of the same 23 kids that I went to kindergarten through 8th grade with. He came in and he asked our class if we had any questions. And for some reason, in genuine curiosity, I asked him what hell was like. And he went into this explanation that hell was essentially like being alone in the desert, being burned by the sun, being so thirsty, looking for shade, looking for water, finally seeing like a series of oases, running to it, and jumping into this pool, but then the pool's gasoline, and then you're on fire, and you get out and you go to the next one, and it's gasoline, and he said this goes on for eternity. And I just thought, like, the way I could see it in my little 8-year-old mind, and then something happened. There was a voice inside of me that just said, "No, I don't think this is true. I don't buy it." But it was really good that happened to me because it really made me begin to investigate things from, I wouldn't really say like a critical lens, but the investigation was always like, did that person have that experience? And are they speaking from experience? Or is that just what they've been told by somebody who else was told it, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
And then when I was in like 6th grade, I had this experience where I went out to get the mail I have a strange memory. I remember kind of a lot of details with things. Every Thursday, Sports Illustrated would come, and I would go out and get it, right? And I was in 6th grade. It was like 1990, April of 1990. And I walked out, and my parents, we had this long walkway and a couple of oak trees in our front yard, and these stairs down to the street, and the mailbox was down there. And this thing happened when I was walking out where I heard my inner voice say, and mind you, in Catholic school, there was never any mention of the word meditation. There was never any teachings about anything other than Christ. There was never discussion about Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslim, Judaism, only that Christ was Jewish, so there wasn't really any place that I would have known that this would come into my field of understanding. But I heard of my inner voice say, I wonder when I'm going to start learning about meditation. And I remember I was caught by it as I was walking out this path, and I thought, like, how do I know about that? How do I even know that word? And then this thing happened before I'd walked down these stairs, almost between these two oak trees. Across the street from my parents' house then was like this, it was kind of, I grew up where it was it's now kind of much more developed in Arlington, Virginia, but it was very woodsy across the street, like all these little oaks and pines. And I remember something happened where it was like, I saw the wind kind of move through the trees and my mind just completely went clear. And it was almost like everything, the way I like to describe it, it was like, it's indescribable. So whatever I say doesn't really amount up to anything for what happened, but my mind went completely clear and there was like everything turned to a goo. Like there was just like a substance that interconnected everything, and I recognized myself as that. But it was so clear and obvious and peaceful and wonderful and obvious. That's the most important part. It was so obvious. And it lasted like this, almost like time stood still, like the whole environment was just alive and breathing, and I was breathing it as the entire environment, and this human body is just a prop amongst other props in this substanceless substance goo that was showing itself. And then all of a sudden it was literally like, and it came back to my mind came back and I went, whoa, what was that? And I thought, like, that was interesting. And I walked down and I remember I got the mail. And as I turned around to go back up the stairs, I thought a couple things. I thought, like, that was interesting. That didn't seem like any of the stuff relative to God and Jesus. It had nothing to do with God and Jesus. What was that? And I thought, that was amazing. I can't. And then I thought, like, I can't even tell. If I tell my mom and dad about that, they're going to think I'm crazy. I think something's wrong with me, Mm-hmm. And I just kind of, I wouldn't say I abandoned it because I could feel it. I mean, I could still, it's here, it's this, it's now, Mm-hmm. It never wasn't. It kind of always was what it is. And, it's beyond what's known in a way. And I just kind of tucked it in my back pocket and never really knew how to or why to investigate it until I found really yoga, breath work, meditation, TM, and Zen. And then by the time I found really Zen specifically in working with one of my main teachers, Henry Schuckman, over the past almost 10 years now, it's really been about like these glimpses that can happen and the direct experience, and so ultimately the investigation, I love the way you describe your podcast, and I think it, like, my experience of what's gotten me here to be on it relates. It's like this investigation of the intimacy of direct experience as that which we seek in a way.
1,000%. Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think, and it's funny because I went to Catholic school myself, and so that all hits home, and I went back and forth within the church, like up until like I was 30 almost. So it was this drawback and this feeling of guilt. And then there was really this investigation that had to happen because for so long, even at church, this isn't right. This isn't clicking for me. And there was always this feeling of not everyone's safe here. And I don't want to be in a place where everyone isn't safe. Yeah. And then psychedelics really helped with that for me specifically. And your experience as an 8-year-old almost sounds like this beautiful awakening into like a psychedelic trip. Like, what? Totally. That is so unreal.
What's funny is that I've had this conversation with a couple of friends of mine, a couple of my two good guy friends who live here, who both have real committed meditation practices. And we talked recently about like is an awakening through a psychedelic experience valid? Yeah, of course, absolutely. An awakening through anything, through a car accident, something traumatic, through through the loss of a loved one, anything that can bring us to like a place of like seeing kind of through the veil, I think is valid. But the experience that I had when I was 12, in
sixth grade,
sixth grade, and then the other experiences that I've had, even through breathwork. I mean, I would even say less through breathwork, more through sitting and through just like mundane interaction with the world, where something became known that was kind of maybe obscured before. Those have been the most distinct and clear experiences where I've gone like, that. And some of the biggest experiences I've had on psychedelics, I've come out and said, great, I'd like to have that happen without the use of the substance.
Totally. I feel that 1,000%. And even it was really interesting because moving to Portland and going through rebirthing breathwork, that's basically what I took myself through. I was doing it every day. Not really the wisest decision. I wasn't with a facilitator. I was kind of doing it blindly. Yeah. And I went through my own dark night of the soul and had to integrate this process of exactly what you're saying, because I was chasing this thing after, because I would get so high from these experiences with breathwork that I was like, okay, well, how do I find that sober? Like, how do I find that not under the influence of, an upregulated nervous system and seeking something? How do I find it in just presence resonance, right? Like, and sitting in that space. And so how do you do that on a daily basis for yourself? How do you integrate that process of seeking presence within your daily life through ritual or through, however you show up for you?
Well, since really it's been it's probably almost been 14 years or something now that I've had a consistent meditation practice daily. But almost 10 from working with Henry and in the approach of Zen. But and I do a thing called the koan study, which is like these parables and phrases. I don't even want to really get into that, but because I don't really, when I sit with a koan, I'll read it and I'll investigate it very briefly, and then I'll just open up to what's actually right here. One of my other teachers, his name is Riaz, kind of gives this analogy that I love to share, which is, just observing how we almost exist in the world like we're walking around with clenched fists. And if you think about like the implications of what it would actually be like if we realized that our fists were clenched with everything, with, grabbing this cup of coffee I can do it with my fist clenched, but what if I just soften my hand? And I just find that like every time particularly in the I sit in the morning and I sit before I go to bed, no matter what kind of a day I've had, no matter what I've coming up, right? And that's kind of it. It's opening into the space of the here and now. And there does seem to be like this act of like opening the palm, even in the most subtle way, just even literally through physical tension in the body, but opening into the space of awareness.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I think so many of us are coming into the knowing of that physical tension that you were talking about. I know at least many of the folks within my community, it's been this real discovering of, whoa, the body holds so much tension. And if we don't explore that and what's actually occurring, we're going to find ourselves tripping over obstacles within these things that we've almost undiscovered for ourselves. Like it's an opportunity to feel these places of tension and lean in to the softening of those things.
And opening, right?
Yeah.
And, in the past, I've had a lot of crazy big transitions in the past year and a half of my life. I went through a divorce. And I resigned from being a school teacher, and it was an amicable divorce. We just had a lot of misalignments with major life things like beliefs in certain medicine approaches, and finances and intimacy, and major misalignments. but we ended up, we came to a kind of what felt like the end of a karmic knot. But nevertheless, it was very difficult to like go through the major unknowns, and my practice was paramount. However, I mean, it was like sitting and being open in the face of pain and uncertainty, and really like, what am I going to do? And what do I do with my life now? Not just in terms of my marriage, because I also resigned from a career as a high school special ed teacher. So and I found this a lot. Like my best childhood friend just had a cancer diagnosis, colon cancer, and he had a tumor removed, and he's in so much pain. And when you're in pain, or when somebody you know is in pain, it's like it's hard to be in a place where there's literally nothing you can do besides trust that whatever happened is meant to happen, and is going to happen like it does, and it's kind of life moving through us. But the practice has been this place to come back to, really address and soften and kind of open up space into my direct experience of being here in this world at this time. And I feel like I'm kind of starting to kind of like go down a rabbit hole. I don't really know.
I love the rabbit hole. No, I'm here for it. I think that's part of the discovering of what this life has to offer us, right? There's so much, I think, that we can unlearn about our society through that investigative mind. And we don't need to live the way that we were maybe taught to live. There's another way. And so this podcast, the heart behind it is really to provide insight to that, and maybe offer a lens of perspective to folks who wouldn't normally see it through that lens, and just go there,
And I think that, like, in terms of the question you asked about, like, what do I really do? It's like this ongoing kind of individualized science experiment, right? Yeah. But I will say that the single thing of everything that I've engaged and then studied and then been compelled to share, the single thing that has been the most potent by far has been a relationship with silence and with stillness and presence, like that. And that's what's really opened up the space of my heart. And it's like this this kind of thing that we were referring to with psychedelics is a little bit like breath work too. I still practice breath work every day. I do at least some conscious breathing. I haven't done a really big breathe, like a one-on-one breathe with a facilitator on my own in a while, because I haven't felt called or like the need to.
Totally.
Because part of it does feel to me like there can be this chasing of like kind of getting high, and that almost feels a little bit like a bypass.
1,000%. I've experienced that so many times, and it's funny because this past year, I've really had to do an uncovering of what does the breath mean for you in your practice of stillness and sitting in meditation and silence. And I found myself going from these, planned out processes of breathing to just being and just letting the breath be what it is and just noticing.
It's a breath awareness.
Just noticing. And our breath collective really taught me that. Like, that was, oh my gosh, my experience with just learning from you and Reese and the rest of the team. It was just it was so vital for me to expand what I had already learned. My facilitation course was done with a little bit. I feel like I was like hasty and like signing up and wanting to learn. And I wish I would have done a little bit more research and where I was going with it, but again, it was where I was at the time. It was the tension, trying to grab onto something, and then learning through you and Reese and again, the rest of the team. It was just like, no, it doesn't need to be like that. And it's like, okay, cool. Let's go and see what that is. And it's been this uncovering, just a constant uncovering of just letting the breath be what it is.
Yeah.
So
one of the
cool.
main things I love to share that I think is like a really potent teaching, it was one of the early teachings I got really more from pranayama, from a yoga approach with breath, which is sort of the first place that I really began to investigate breath practice. We call it breath science, whatever you want, right? Which is very different. It has very different energetic response or reactions. It's kind of a lot more subtle than what a lot of breathwork does, modern breathwork, so to speak. But one of the things I love sharing with people is that like it's great to get into connected breathing every day, to work the breath that way and to experiment. Cool, do that. Absolutely, I do it, right? But I think what's more potent is the practice of bringing the mind to an awareness of what's happening with my breath in as many normal life experiences that we're having as possible, right? And that's kind of what I tell people. And then it becomes more of like a mind training than something of like a biohacking or
Totally.
You know, or like I'm in a state change, which is all good to do that. It's good to know how to go into it. In fact, I saw something maybe I saw it on Instagram by somebody I follow that's in the breathwork world. I don't remember who, and I definitely am not going to say if I did, because I don't want to bag on anybody. But it went down this like track in like a minute, or maybe it was like a reel that was like 2 minutes, where it went to like when we learn certain breathing patterns and techniques, and you understand how they relate to the way that your nervous system works in the world, what we come into is this understanding of how to control our state. And I just kind of heard that, and I'm like, wait a minute. Not the like the value of letting go of control.
That was literally all
Yeah.
It's the tension. It's like, it's so interesting, but the tension is really where I think our society, that's been the disservice. It's like, we have like America first, like it's this constant control. It's like, well, what about the open hand release of just, again, like you said, letting go? Like, and you practice surfing, I know, is such a big part of your life. And to me, that is one of the ultimate practices of letting go and just allowing this beautiful force to carry you, right? Like,
totally. You're in flow state, then you're in flow state, and things happen, and in a way you're like, that just happened, and I really did not have any thought influencing that. It happens in a natural way. I surfed a wave north here today called North Reef Beacons. It was big and kind of high tide, but a couple waves I got was like just in the moment, and the mind isn't in there thinking like, do that, you know. It's flow state.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, because I have such an appreciation for surf, and what is that like? Like, how does that help you? Because I'm sure it helps you lean into the integration of presence resonance and all that you practice. So like, what does surfing do for you specifically in your soul and in your spirit?
It's, I've had this conversation before. One of the things that makes surfing distinct, I mean, there's very few things that like have the same resonance that surfing has for me. Part of it is that you are out there and you are interacting with an energy that's so alive. I mean, it's not just moving water. It's not just moving water that comes from 1,000 miles away, that comes from a massive storm that had a lot of wind that created that kind of disruption on the surface of the water that made that come here. That storm that relates to like the way that the entire kind of weather system of our planet moves, and then you're getting into like, it really is this big thing that you can tap into. And when you think about it that way, I mean, as soon as you start thinking about it, you almost kind of lose the actual intimate connection to it, And so a lot of times what I'll find is that like everybody who I know who surfs, especially when you surf a lot, you want to go out there and you want to get a really good wave, or you want to perform right, you want to surf well. But, I'm 45 and my body is like aging, and it's not like I'm good, but sometimes I'm stiff. Like my back is stiff sometimes and tight, and, like just the energy in the morning, you feel a little bit like sluggish or slow, or it's cold or whatever. And so a lot of times what I try to do is just kind of And then also you bring in the aspect of crowds and other people. And I've never been a competitive surfer. I tried to surf better than somebody or something like that. You know, I mean, I ride mid-length boards and kind of cruisy 70s single fin kind of.
Love it.
Just kind of try
cruising.
Cruisy. And, I definitely try to catch myself when my mind is becoming frustrated with the way that I'm performing or the way that I'm getting frustrated by a crowd, and just remember, like, wait a second, I'm in the Pacific Ocean right now. How lucky am I, you know, to be in this living environment? My phone is far away from me. The internet is far away from me right now. Not distracted. Here, how fully here can I be? Regardless of like how good or not good of a session I have. You know?
That's so good.
It's always easier when you get a bomb or you get a really good wave, you do a really good turn or something. Ooh, you know, so.
Yeah. When you're just like feeling saucy on your board. Yeah. It's like, I've only had the pleasure of catching a couple like good waves that I'll never forget, but paddling out and just being on the water, that alone is just like this sweet connection with the earth that really, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. I love to hike. I love to be out in the river when it's warm enough. And even sometimes when it's cold, I like to go mob it and, you know, just sit with the earth. But there's still nothing that's matched surfing for me. There's nothing like it. It's truly such a beautiful, and I'm so, you know, I think that it speaks to who you are and just the way that you do flow into your existence. And
thank you.
It's very cool. It's such an honoring. You getting to play that out with the people that you interact with and the work that you do. It's like you're living and breathing this embodiment of the thing you love, you know?
Totally. Yeah. You know, one of the other things I like to share with people that I like to remind myself of is that, like, we all really and I think this kind of comes about when you actually do sit in yourself and sit, not even necessarily in yourself, but because we could also say, like, sit with your body inside of you in a way, right? Mm-hmm. But just sit and slowing down in that way. The resonant presence that can come forth is this reminder of the opportunity that, like, we can have this imprint everywhere we go. Like we do have some semblance of an influence in the way that this world is. Like, what kind of a world do we want to live? Not just live in, but live, right, from within us. And so that's why I like just like deliberately looking people in the eyes and smiling and feeling that from the space inside of you, for me, has become a practice. I think I had heard something on a podcast during COVID, and it was like about essential workers, and it was about the recognition of, like, here's everybody like cooped up inside, but then you get people like in the grocery store that, like, they have to go to work and everybody's in masks and I thought, like, wow, I'm going to make an effort to actually connect with the clerk just to say, how's your day going? You know?
Yeah.
And you can see it make a difference in somebody's field. You know, it's almost
1,000%.
Like, yeah. And that seems to be one of the byproducts of a presence practice.
Definitely. That's probably, it's interesting. That's almost like where my practice of spirituality began. I think that's maybe interesting because there was so much that I needed to learn about the body specifically, and that tension, so much that was learned through my family and just my upbringing. But with presence and people, that's always been like just my innate gift. And I worked in the grocery retailer business for a long time, and it was like an honor to be behind the counter and like ringing people up and like just having these incredible conversations with people that, you know, I maybe wouldn't have had. And I had folks that like I would ring up that came to my wedding because we built these connections that are like, I don't know where else I would have done this, but you're meeting so many folks that it happens, and it does make a difference. So I love that. And I can tell that that's who you are. Like, I can tell that like you bring your integrity for your work into your daily life. It's very apparent. And again, with that first breathe that I had with you, it was just like this, whoa, like I felt your presence through the screen. And it was in the midst of the pandemic when all of us were kind of, experiencing whatever we were experiencing. So like, what else do you do? Because I know you do community breathes and things like that, but what do you do intentionally to integrate your community into these beautiful practices that you live and breathe?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that the first thing I would say was not enough. I can do more. And it's a good reminder. One of the things I do is maintain my own level of being a student and constantly finding something new that I'm not necessarily so much seeking, but remaining open and receptive and curiosity with, because there's so many sources of inspiration, and of kind of maybe a clearing out of blind spots of areas that we haven't looked or realized to look in yet.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I teach a public class here in Encinitas every Sunday, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. That's some yoga and some movement. It's actually at a studio that's an art gallery that I rent the space, and Reese rents it Thursdays and does just breath. And I've taught at a lot of yoga studios. I've taught yoga for over 15 years now. But I kind of, and I still practice yoga asana. But I kind of have shifted more into this blend of kind of yoga and kind of flowy, sort of some qigong integrated into asana, but with breath as the main practice of what we're doing in that context of the body, which really removes the active mind from its entanglement into breath work. Yeah, I do a couple other things. I'm involved in a couple of different, they're not really men's groups. There happen to be all men. And I've had a couple of great mentors that I've made close friends with as mentors who lead a couple different groups. And I have my own that's going to come up later in this year. That's kind of an embodiment thing. I don't know if I'm going to do it just for men yet. But I'm going to open up kind of a 10-spot thing that'll be a 3-month thing that for people that kind of want to step into presence, resonance, and how to hold it, and not just hold it this way, but hold it and walk into their world with it, and be awake in the world. It's funny that you're in Portland. I've only been to Portland maybe 5 or 7 times. And the first time I went to Portland was February of, like I said, I'm weird with dates, but it was February of 2014. And I went to do a 4-day kind of mini immersion training with a guy named Michael Stone. Do you know that name?
Mm-mm.
He was a kind of a yoga and Buddhist blend teacher. Really, he was kind of also, had a big community in Canada. And he wrote a bunch of books. And one of the books that he had written was called Awake in the World. And I went to Portland in early February of 2014. I got to the airport. I got on the train. It started snowing. It snowed that whole weekend. It was epic winter wonderland. I guess that's not very common in Portland. And I stayed at a hotel that was about a mile from this church space. I think the place was called the Yoga Space. In fact, there that owns it named Michelle Lowe, and she's wonderful. I don't even practice with her, but she was a student of Michael's, and just by her presence alone, I would recommend her. And I remember walking and just having these dialogues with Michael around this of and getting back to the reason why I'm saying this, getting back to that question of the community aspect of involvement of sharing is ongoing. And I don't think I don't know that one, when they really recognize the value and importance of it, would ever feel like my work is done.
1,000%. 1,000%. Because It's almost, my husband and I were actually just talking about this yesterday. We dropped off some clothes at a homeless shelter, and we were very intentional about not dropping it off at Goodwill because it just doesn't feel like they're going to just upsell it, right? It's like, whatever. And when we went, we haven't been practicing service work for a couple of years now, and we feel that gap. Yes, we're integrated in community and we're doing our best to practice our intentionality with our community. But there's always more. There's always more. Who are the people that we're not reaching, who potentially couldn't get that reach if we didn't, or someone else didn't make the intention to actually go out of their way and do so, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Always can do more. But it's also, it's the opening and the closing and the knowing when you're able and available to provide that kind of space and presence to those people, because it comes with different kinds of territories, right?
Totally. Yeah. And finding that balance where you're not totally like depleting yourself. As a teacher, as a school teacher, I can tell you honestly, like I just felt drained all the time. Granted, I was like living a very active life where I was practicing a lot of yoga and going on Zen retreats when I could, and surfing when I could, and having a social life. But the school thing, like being a public high school teacher in a big high school, I think because of the institutionalization of it, you know, I wasn't really getting the level of like rest to be as effective in the places where I saw the real need or the real effectiveness of, you know, I had for years, I would have Henry come. Henry, I wouldn't have him, but we agreed, and Henry graced me and Encinitas with his presence, and he'd come and he would do like a mini Zen weekend. And I've had Aaron Overstreet come and stay with me, and he's done rebirthing stuff here. And the breath thing's been really cool because it started out as just started out that me and Reese were breathing together, and then we started inviting friends over to do breath practices. It's like 2016.
Wow.
And then it turned into a thing where Reese was having people every Sunday to his house called Ice Church. And we would do a big breathe, 45 minutes, and then people would bring some snacks and some, you know, muffins, and Reese would serve tea, and he had an ice bath, and people would ice bath, and we do a big gratitude share. And that was really the inspiration for our breath collective.
That's so beautiful. I'm glad that you said something about that, because I really did want to ask. And I think it came out of the innate curiosity of you two spending time in presence together.
Yeah.
It's really how it was birthed, which makes total sense, especially from the two of you. So it's so sweet. And everything that is a really beautiful community, right? Like it's really kind of now taking its own shape and form.
Yeah. Well, when we start, you know, what's funny is when we started it, it was this platform. We had like 5 facilitators, and when we launched it as like a business model to see what happened with it, it was like the 6 a.m. Monday through Friday subscription model, $40 a month. Join. It was on Facebook Live. You know, it was like a private group on Facebook Live. We were running it like that. And I remember one of my really good friends here, her name's Sarah, she was like, so how long are you going to do that for? Like, don't you think you're going to get over that pretty quickly? And I was like, and I said to her then, I go, I think it probably will grow branches that we can't even see yet.
Aww.
You know? And then the pandemic happened, and we put together, like, a lot of people were really becoming curious about what's actually happening here. Like, biomechanically, and what's happening in my nervous system, and what are these different styles. So as we put together the intensive, we've run like 11 to 12 of those at this point. And out of that, people were like, how do I facilitate this? Like, so we developed our 6-month facilitator training. Yeah, and it's been a really cool thing. And we just did a New Year's Day community. It was like,
I saw that.
Yeah, it was short, kind of quick breathe, but it was like all rainy and cold. And
so cool.
We jumped in the ocean. Yeah,
I wanted to be there so bad. I was like, this looks so fun, especially because I know you all are just such a good group of people to be around and to ring in the new year with, you know? So cool. And I love that it really is coming from a heart-centered place. I know that that you both do your own due diligence to look within and to sit with yourself, right? Because ultimately we can't give back from a centered place if we're not doing the work ourselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
yeah.
Yeah. What would you offer as a piece of suggestion to someone looking to sit with their own mind and just kind of lean into the stillness of presence?
I think that the removal of it needing to be any particular school or approach of meditation is important, because really it doesn't have to be any of that. Those are valuable. Structure is valuable. Some people really seem to thrive more from structure. I have at certain times, but it's led me to this place where, specifically for me, and what I love to show people is, like, right now, if you just listen, and if you actually just like let the way that it feels inside of your body, let kind of a sinking down happen. So you're not listening so much from your ears between your head, but so that by relaxing your body and letting your breath move as it naturally is already moving, as it has been already today and your whole life, without our need to think about it, but feeling the relaxed breath and kind of like letting your body become tuning fork, you'll notice that there's this kind of like quiet expansiveness that begins to make itself known. And it's not ever that we're pulling it out of thin air. It's almost more that we're clearing thick air, and all of a sudden the sky, like nature of mind and of being, is more clearly apparent as it's already here. So I think like this value of like listening, but listening from your body, and kind of dropping where there's the clenched fist of tension from just being a human being in the world. Just giving it doesn't even have to take long. In 3 breaths, people can really change that unconscious non-presence. You can start to sink into like this expansive quietness. And it's almost like, one of the ways I like to articulate it is that the more that we do this, what we begin to really feel is that the quiet, which is already here, begins to lead. And it's like going from this place of control kind of into like effortless, like letting go of unconscious clenching effort into trust. And out of that, there's this expansiveness, and it starts to feel like the world itself doesn't become me and other. That there's this interconnected piece. And I think you even mentioned that in your description of your podcast, like the interconnected, intimate aspect of inner investigation. And we start to see that like the inner and the outer really are not two.
It's like your goo, right? Like the goo and the feeling of it all being one, and we're all just an interconnected organism, like here on this living and breathing planet. It's like the wave. It's the most beautiful description of just watching this flow and just like watching it go by. And it's not that there isn't force there, right? Like,
right. And it's really easy, I think, to get stuck in a place of being fixed or stuck in like, oh my God, I'm stuck here. It's going to be like this forever. And it's hard to remember sometimes that nothing is going to be like it is, whether it's awful or glorious or mundane or boring or painful. It's going to move. Ram Dass said it really well, make friends with change.
Yeah.
This kind of letting go of like needing to know, this trusting that there's something bigger. And I don't like to like kind of get into like talking about God or anything like that, because I mean, if I was to, I would start to get into like, well, what is God besides this seeing and experiencing and tasting and touching and feeling right now? Yeah. It's like that. Teddy's, the book was called Teddy's, a Salinger short story. You ever know this story about Teddy?
I don't think so.
It's it's from a book I read in high school. It's one of his many short stories in this book. And really it's about this like gifted, like kind of guru child. And he's on like a boat, like a cruise with his family. This is like in the 50s. And they know he's a guru and he's kind of like a prodigy. And his father does not get it at all. And the father comes in and he's like, got a glass of milk, or he's got a thing of milk and a glass, and he's like takes the milk and he pours it in the glass, and he says to his dad, he goes, "Don't you see? It's like God pouring God into God." And the dad is like, "What the? Who are you? You know?
Who are you? Where did you come from?" Yeah. No, it's so true. It's like, and I think that's one of the things that we can be so quick to judge, and by we I just mean all of us, right? Like collective consciousness, and in our dark shadow state we have the tendency to place judgment upon those negative emotions or those things about other people that we see, that we obviously see within ourselves that we don't like, and then we want to control it, we want to shape it, we want to shift it, and it's like no, it's all holy, it's all holy.
Right. Yeah, and one of the things that I practice a lot, particularly in relationships of all kinds, is the ongoing development of awareness of how I'm listening.
That's huge. That is huge.
And that's huge. Where the integration of, okay, soften and back up a little bit. And I know there's a couple things that you can notice. They're like little kind of Jedi mind tricks you can notice. Body language of people. When you're in conversation, especially intense conversation with maybe your partner or something, is looking at your partner, looking at the other, when you're talking, if they have their kind of mouth open, is an indication that they're not listening. They're in a place where they're basically developing their argument to you of why you're wrong or what you're missing, you know? And it's not to go then point out and go, "You're not listening to me, close your mouth," right? But rather like just take it in and make it your own inner practice of like soften your body, relax, and really open up from your body and listen to people. And you kind of get under the words and under the surface. But it takes kind of some diligence and some patience with yourself.
Takes a lot of diligence and patience with yourself. I think that's probably been my biggest challenge. If I can, I can totally be honest and vulnerable and say that I was raised in a family where it's like everyone wanted to be right and everyone was constantly interrupting to interject and make themselves known and heard and seen because they weren't given the space and safety to feel that in their own homes. I get it. I get why my parents were like that. But it has been a constant unlearning of like, just be. Like, it's okay. It's okay. And the listening to the people that we're in community with is an evolving practice, right? Because we all change constantly. So again, with just getting some wisdom from you as someone who practices this, how do you, I know you said, to soften, but also, what does that mean for you to like be in relationship with someone and to potentially have those feelings come up? Like, what do you do in your own body to like, open the fist?
Yeah. Like literally that, and recognize that a lot of times I'm in a relationship now that has been, coming up on a year, in a few months, and I'm very, very deeply in love. And
congratulations.
Yeah. And it's funny because, from exiting a marriage and some of the heartache and pain, in that partnership and building a life, I really felt I went into kind of a place of, oh my God, I might end up like kind of alone or just a loner. And I had to become comfortable with that. And, but anyways, in this new relationship, there have been a lot of opportunities where for me in being like not a space holder, but in observing like through challenging things, whether it's between us or other life stuff that she's going through, that there really is, through the resonant field of interaction, there really is the opportunity that when you soften inside of you, and when you maybe even sometimes like slow your breath down on the exhales and relax, you can, I have seen in me the turning down of the need to try to fix something or to try to be like giving the right answer when I don't know, right? And then what's deeper than that is the recognition of what I do know is that I want you to be like happy and healthy. And actually, this gets into some of these levels of compassion, right? And we actually would love to talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
We'll be back to it. But you know, it's like, it's almost like I'll give you an exact example. This morning, my beautiful love, Mariah is her name. She sleeps on her stomach. And, she runs kind of hot at night. Like she's definitely like she's a little nuclear power plant, which is kind of when the weather's cold. But sometimes I'll notice that she's like in sleep and she's dreaming or something, like in certain stage of sleep. And like very early this morning, I recognized, and we were kind of cuddling, and she was kind of spooning me. So she was like on my back, right? And I recognized that her breath is kind of fast and shallow, you know, and it wasn't even like she wasn't in distress or anything. She just was. And I just kind of tampered with like, what happens if I tune into her breath and slow mine down while tuning into hers? And I watched her, I felt her body without even seeing her or communicating verbally any of this to her. Energetic communication. I just went into a slow, relaxed, softened my inner space, and that resonant field really affected hers. And, you know, I've heard from a couple of trauma specialists that in an experience with somebody that you're very intimate and close with, when they have, whether we want to call it trauma or they're going through a really hard time, that the best thing that you can do in your own body is remain as calm as possible. It's almost like that airplane thing of like, you know, the oxygen masks drop down and your kid is next to you. And so you want to put your oxygen on your kid, but actually to do that, you have to be really equipped to do that. You have to take care of yourself first, right? Not in a selfish way. It's actually somehow selfless, but to remember that your inner state is kind of paramount in dealing with a challenging relationship thing. Now, I'm not saying by any means that I'm an expert. I'm a work in progress, and I have tons and tons of work to do to become a better human being and a better partner. Right? But I happen to have found a partner where we have like very open, clear, ongoing, evolving communication. You know, and that communication comes down to like really understanding one another and one another's needs.
Absolutely. And respecting each other as it evolves and as it changes and shifts and all of that. And you brought up compassion. So yeah, I'm sure that's a part of it as well, right?
Yeah. So recently I did a retreat. I did a session. Session means a Japanese word. It means touching the heart. I do a couple a year with Henry in Santa Fe at the center that I've gone to for almost 10 years now. And during it, he talked about the 5 hindrances, which are desire, aversion, restlessness, like laziness, and doubt, and how in practice, particularly when you're in these longer periods of practice, you can really start to observe like mental states and tendencies. And that when you actually can kind of like see them as mental constructs and kind of like non-reality, right? But also not force the mind to stop kind of going in a train of thought. What can happen is what begins to emerge is this greater and greater relationship with compassion. And then he talked about, and I'm going to massacre this because I'm not a Zen master and I'm not an authorized Zen teacher by any means, but I did find it to be really relevant and valuable to observing that there's, I think they're called the heavenly states of compassion. And there's kind of seems to be 4 of them. And the first one is called karuna, which is essentially wanting people to be free of suffering. Right? And the second is called mudita. And mudita has to do with wanting people to be full of joy. Right? So it's like, once you get somebody free of suffering, well, what does that mean? You don't want them just to have like a piece of bread just to get by if they're starving. No, like I want you to like have whatever food would make you alive and grateful for it, right? And then we get into the level of equanimity where there seems to be like this balancing. And then that leads into the level of metta, which is like loving kindness. But these seem to be like qualities that emerge with sincere practice is one way we can put it. Maybe study is another. True, like self-introspection and investigation. But I think they can really be shown to us when we turn the lens back onto ourselves in relationship. Relationships are like this great ground for growth. We all want to be in like the great, perfect relationship where we're totally vibing and like just stoked and thrilled and it's easy. But it's not always like that,
No, relationships can be really hard. Yeah. I mean, my partner and I, when we moved up here, holy crap, we had so much unlearning to do from home and just the programs that we had incorporated into our marriage from when we were married and being young and married and being a part of the church and all of that. And then coming to Portland, deconstructing all of that, and then having to now reintegrate these new ideas and thoughts and beliefs that we've now put into practice. And it's been a task, to say the least, and a constant spiritual act, right? Yeah. That's what relationships are. I believe it's the key and foundation to ultimate spiritual acts of loving and expanding our awareness to how we can evolve as conscious human beings on this planet.
Yeah. And I don't want to seem like I'm like a huge advocate for like the use of substances, but I do think that like if people have stability, that certain psychedelic experiences can really open up a self-reflectiveness that doesn't necessarily come with breath work or meditation or even yoga. Like it's a whole different level of conscious mind exploration that opens up. I don't know why I just thought to bring that up.
I think it's important. Yeah. I think again, I like what you said, and it's not for everyone. Like it really needs to come from the investigation within your own heart, your own mind, your own spirit to know if it's something that you're ready for and if it's what's going to fulfill you in where you're going. But it can be certainly a very helpful tool. I know it has been for me. The first times I had like experimented were like purely experimentation, being young, just like, here, let's try this. And like having the veil, what felt like just like, ripped off and like, whoa, okay. And then having to go through my own suffering and then to actually know that I'm not a victim. And then to incorporate all of that into this new becoming of flow and then reintroducing psychedelics when I was then grounded. Game changer. Basically.
It's funny you say that. When I first did LSD, I was in senior in high school, and I did it with a buddy one night. I'm actually going to quickly tell the story if you're good with it.
I would love that.
I had gotten in trouble. I had been speeding in one of my parents' cars, and I got pulled over, like going like 70 miles an hour in like a 35 mile an hour. Just being a stupid kid. And my parents were like, you can't, no drive. It wasn't like my license was suspended. My parents were like, no car for you. So it was right before Christmas of my senior year in high school. And my friend Reed came and got me. We went over to his mom's house, and we had 2 hits of acid. And I had never done acid, neither did he. And at like 9 p.m. we took this LSD on a Saturday night in December in Northern Virginia. And then he lived with his mom, like his mom, it was just his mom. And we went out and his mom was watching Saturday Night Live. And I remember we sat down on the couch with his mom and started watching Saturday Night Live. And nothing was kind of, it takes a little while for it to come on. And, but I wasn't like worried, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble or she's going to know, or I'm going to, and Reed got up and he went into his bedroom and he was gone for a minute, but he was an artist. And I thought maybe he was just in there doing art. So like 20 minutes, I felt like a little twinge and I was like, oh, that's different. And I went into his room and he was asleep. And I was kind of like, dude, no way, really? I guess whatever this is going to be me alone. And then I went back out and I sat down on the couch and I proceeded to watch Saturday Night Live with his mom. Mm-hmm. And my mind, it was a very clean batch of LSD that we took. That's the first time that I'd never had an experience like this before. My mind opened up in this most exquisite way. Where I remember literally going, I cannot believe how freed my mind feels. Like I feel like I can think almost outside of my body. And there's something so much bigger that has opened up here. And so, I remember like his mom was laughing at skits. I just had this like Cheshire cat grin, and my jaw was kind of like not clenching, but clenched. Where I was just like, just like my eyes is so big, everything open, and but I was like completely, totally normal. Like I could interact and everything, and we weren't really talking a lot. We were just watching the show, and I just said to her like, and he lived like maybe 3 miles from me. And I said, Mrs. Harmon, I'm going to walk home. I think I'm going to walk home. And she goes, oh, honey, it's supposed to be really cold out there. I would drive you, but it's kind of late. Are you sure? You're kind of far. And I said, yeah, I'm kind of awake. And I remember she walked me to the door. I put my coat on. I remember she closed the door. I was looking at her when she closed the door, and I remember hearing like the of the door closing and feeling for maybe the first time in my life a unique gateway into presence through listening behind me. It was so quiet, and I turned around and it had been snowing and there wasn't any wind, and it was like just these like snowflakes coming down and street lights and maybe an inch and a half of snow on the ground. And I walked home, and it probably took me an hour, maybe it took me an hour and a half. Time was gone, but it was just like the crunching of my feet on the snow and like observing the like light and this way the snow came down, and I just felt so expanded and so open. And I knew clearly like this is not, sure there could be recreational fun that you could have on these, like at a fish show, which I've seen a lot of fish shows and have maybe done a little bit of LSD at fish, but I just knew, I'm like, there's something that this opens up that's kind of really special if you pay attention to it the right way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
It's so, that's such a beautiful story too, because you had that interconnection that you were sitting with his mom on the couch, and like you were still there. You were still in that space of presence with her, even though maybe you weren't talking, you were still holding space with her. And then to go outside and then to commune with the earth, when you get to experience that type of expansiveness, it's medicine. Yeah. And it can be used as a tool. It can be abused, certainly. But I think with conscious connection with our own bodies and our own minds and our own spirits, we can know how to dance in this space of using it as a tool and integrating. Yeah. And then seeking what we learn through those things, right?
Totally. And I remember as I graduated high school and then went to college, and occasionally I didn't really experiment with a lot of LSD because I knew how intense and powerful it was, especially for the brain. And a couple times I had experiences with it where I felt like insecurities come up, particularly in social settings where I kind of felt like this isn't for that. I'm not like socially engaged right now. I'm kind of like internal and I feel weird. But I didn't do psychedelics for a long time. I came to a point with LSD where I had a trip that was really powerful. I went to college in Charleston, South Carolina. I had a fun, really wild, fun night tripping with some friends and laughing really hard and like really hallucinating. But I kind of knew during it, I was like, I know what this is. I've experienced this now. Like, this isn't new, you know, and I don't want to use this as like a casual thing. It's not a casual thing. I took a long time break, like, man, probably over 10 years. And then by the time I engaged with a psychedelic again, I actually did mescaline with my best friend, kind of for his quote unquote bachelor party. This must have been like maybe 2009 or something. And mescaline was a wild, awesome, incredible experience. And it's a rare thing to find. And it was like this, I kind of had this introspective recognition of like, whoa, like a lot has changed since the last time I did a psychedelic. I know myself in a much different way now. Plus, 10, 12 years of life and growth, and from my teens into my 20s into my probably early 30s. And I recognized like, wow, it could be really interesting to see what these substances offer in terms of confronting or like addressing some of the spiritual insights that I've had happen in my life, And I had one more thing that felt important to say. Oh yeah. And then it really, when I found Zen, what it felt like was a lot of what Zen pointed to, oftentimes through like some poetry and some very short things, and one of them I'll say in a second here, was like just the fleeting nature of life and our opportunity to be really intimate with how this moment is occurring, with the opportunity to like really embrace it and be intimate with it without the clenching fist of holding on, because we really truthfully can't. There's nothing we can do. Life is going to do what life decides to do. And that's really that, And so there's a couple of different phrases. One is from the Diamond Sutra. And just the image that it conjures up feels to me very much like kind of reticent of a lot of what I took with me, so to speak, in terms of memory, what kind of remained in terms of like the resonance that stayed in my heart, that I remember when I think about like that walking home under the street lights with the snow with no wind, and I can even hear the crunching sound of my footsteps. Those footsteps, think about it, I came up like a hill to my house, and I looked back and they were gone. They were covered in snow again. It's like that. And the thing from the Diamond Sutra is like the moon reflected in a drop of dew shaken from a crane's bill in flight.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's like, see all things like this.
That's beautiful.
It's just like
I love that.
Glimpse. And we happen to be alive and awake in this blink of an eye.
And how lucky we are.
Yeah. And there comes up awe and gratitude, appreciation.
Yeah. It's like all of it's holy. Like there isn't a part of it, because without the hardships, how would we know how beautiful life is? How would we be able to see the gravity of life and everything that's in its midst, right? Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you so much for your time and for your energy.
A little thing, what?
Oh, yes, actually. Yes.
Something that I've reflected on a lot is like, you hear these stories about people when they're going to die, like older people when they're going to die, and where they have regrets in life. And so part of what I've investigated through practice is like, what does it mean to live a life where whenever that time comes, which we don't know when it could be, we don't know how prolonged and how much presence we'll have in it, or if it's going to be like my friend Danny, who died surfing in Indonesia on a double overhead wave, like lights out. He was in the tube, clipped, hit the reef, lights out, gone. We don't know what really will happen when that moment happens, right? But if you did have the opportunity to sink into, how do I live a life where at the end of life, I can look back and go, I am at peace with the effort that I put in. What does that really mean? Where was it most important? To me, what happens, I look at and I go, like, how was I in my relationships? How did I feel about expressing love and about addressing conflict or disagreements with people or problems like that? And how did I further that kind of resonance into the world? And I think this is like an inside job that we all get to actually investigate and embody and actualize. So for me, that's kind of like the source of why, one of the sources of why I think it's important that we develop a presence practice, because then you get to see how it not even has to be applied, but how it begins to lead this like awe-filled life that we're all living.
So beautiful. Like how it becomes your being, right? Like that's your being. It's like, and I'm curious to see if that would be, I was going to ask you, like, if you had one thing to offer, like as a form, whether it be a question for people to think about or an offering of wisdom, because you have so much, like what that would be. And,
well,
and I think that's such a good thing, but
one thing I know for certain is that I do not know.
That's a good word.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to that. But I would like to offer to this audience of everybody who hears this, from my own direct interests, that sharing the fact that you have people in your life that you love with them, that you love them, that you want these levels of compassion for them. You want them to be not in suffering. You don't want them to hurt. You want them to thrive, and you want them to be in joy, I think is the most important thing that we can do. That also is something that we turn back onto ourselves. And I think the best way to do that is to like really investigate the potency of silence and stillness and this aliveness that's here, that's beyond what our minds will ever be able to know. And it's sinking again and again. It's like this opportunity to remember. I've been saying this recently, that like in a way, if you really get quiet, and this is kind of like physical, right? But if you really get quiet and you really can bring up focus, you will be able to hear your own heartbeat. And in a way, it's like that's the universe honing in on this little tracking device to find itself again and again. And it's in here. It's not, and it is out there, but this is where we start to see the inside is reflected in everything we see outside.
So good. So good. Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, such an honor and a privilege to have connected with you and to just be on this wild world of interconnecting through community and through consciousness.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing you in person. Get to be in Portland at some point. And if you're ever down here, please be in touch. And thanks for letting me come on and just talk about all these things that I find interesting and I hope valuable to the audience.
Yeah, I certainly think so, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Luke.
My honor.
Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Bye. Hey there, it's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too, so if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.